I'm John Batchelor, Gordon Chang, my colleague and co-host, and we're joined by Chris Gadomski, who's lead analyst nuclear for Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Headline, Chris, TEPCO is to release radioactive water, 3,000 tons of lightly radioactive water from Fukushima Daini, which is a sister complex to the Fukushima Daiichi. It has not happened yet. This release, is this a controversial release, or has this been approved as something logical from what they've had in the disaster?
Well, any time that you're releasing radioactive water, whether or not it's highly radioactive, slightly radioactive water into the ocean, it's going to cause some issues and concerns by the neighboring countries and for most of the people in the world, because it's not a good practice. However, it's a question of what do they do with the water, and there are situations where we have much more highly radioactive water in the Fukushima Daiichi plant that is probably a much bigger concern.
Gordon?
Yeah, Chris, at the Daiichi plant, you have about 34 times the amount of water that they expect to release. So this is really going to be a major issue. I mean, it must be, not only the fisheries people, but just generally the environmentalists in Japan and the general public, right?
Yes, they have about 105 tons of toxic water that believes to have been accumulated in the basement of the reactors in the turbine buildings. And this is increasing by about 500 tons a day. And this water is used to cool down the reactors. And the bottom of the reactors are compromised. Think of a kitchen colander in that the water is poured in to cool them, and then this water leaks out into the basements. And they have a situation that it's almost a triage situation where they have to decide they have to keep the reactors cool, and on the other hand, they have to sort of deal with this accumulated contaminated water. So which is the lesser of two evils? They're trying to get storage tanks in there to go ahead and store this and to decontaminate the water.
One of the immediate outcomes of the disaster in Japan is that Germany, Angela Merkel, Chancellor of all the Germans, has decided, reversing herself, to close all 17 nuclear plants in Germany by 2022, 25% of their electricity from those nuclear plants. Was that a surprise to you as an analyst in nuclear?
Well, the German population is very much against nuclear power, and for similar reasons that the Japanese people may also become resentful for nuclear power, and that they weren't really told the true story in the wake of Chernobyl with as far as the radiation threat. So there's a tremendous amount of popular support in Germany to close down those nuclear power plants.
So again, transparency is the story, and when there's no transparency, you lose trust, you create alienation, and in the event of a catastrophe, that decides it against you. Is that a fair lesson?
That's correct.
Gordon?
Oh, Chris, in the Daiichi plant, we're dealing with some pretty old reactors, GE reactors. And I suspect that in the United States, we have some of those same reactors online. Do we have a real problem with old designed reactors that are still, close to the end of their useful life, but still operating, that could really cause us a problem, just like the ones in Japan?
We have to remember that every time that there's a refueling outage at these nuclear power plants, which happens every 18 to 24 months, that there is an intensive rehabilitation of certain pieces of equipment. So yes, these reactors are old, but they're constantly being upgraded every 18 to 24 months. Having said that, there's still 40-year-old technology, and the new technology that is available, the AP1000, that's being built in 2 sites in the United States, that's substantially improved, substantially safer.
And Chris, Germany shuts down, but other nations are looking at nuclear. There are 2 plants under review process to build here in the United States. There's one about to open in China, but you mentioned to me Saudi Arabia is going forward with nuclear.
Yes, just yesterday, a matter of fact, Saudi Arabia's announced a plan to spend over $100 billion to build 16 nuclear power plants between now and 2030.
And what design are they using? We've got GE in Japan, GE here, but Westinghouse in Georgia and South Carolina, I believe Westinghouse in China. What about Arabia?
Well, there's a lot of people who will be bidding for those projects. The French Areva perhaps have a good inside track. GE is a very big supplier of turbines to the country, so they have an inside track perhaps as well. The Koreans were very, very successful, having just signed a $40 billion contract in the United Arab Emirates. So it's going to be a really interesting and exciting development to who wins those contracts.
Gordon?
Well, Chris, it's interesting because we think of Saudi Arabia as really being this energy superpower with all of its hydrocarbons. I mean, why do they need nuclear energy?
Well, for two very important reasons. One, they anticipate the growth of their electrical consumption to increase by 8% a year. That's absolutely huge. In the United States, we're lucky if we're going 1% or we're maintaining flat. And secondly, and very, very important, and this has implications throughout the entire Middle East, is that they have a demand for water that's increasing 17%. And to get water, you need to desalinate it. And the best way to desalinate water in a carbon-free process is through nuclear power.
I want to spend just a moment with Fukushima Daiichi. Are there a mound of unknowns right now, Chris? Are we still dealing through a through a glass darkly here, and that we cannot come to lessons learned because we haven't gotten in there yet?
Well, there's a lot of lessons to be learned already. One is that this project is starting to erode consumer support and confidence for nuclear power. This project has become the longing crisis. Chernobyl was resolved after 21 days. This is now not going to have cold shutdown until January of 2012, possibly, and radiation release is not controlled for another several months. That's a terrible situation to be in.
Let me bluntly ask. Someone wants to go to Tokyo. Advise against it or for it? Are there too many unknowns to say, take a child to Tokyo?
Well, I don't know about taking a child to Tokyo, but my boss is on his way to Tokyo today, right now.
Gordon?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'd like to take my daughter there. Chris, when you look at Japan, isn't really the issue is, in Chernobyl we could say, oh, it's just the Ukrainians or the Russians, but, here we're talking about a very highly developed society which is supposed to have had all sorts of safety mechanisms in place. Isn't that what really Japan scares us? Because Japan was supposed to be first-rate, state-of-the-art, right?
Absolutely. When I teach a course in nuclear energy at New York University, and one of the days in classes we spend specifically focusing on the culture of a country which is necessary to go ahead and safely manage nuclear power. And we always use Japan as an example of a country that really has their act together or had their act together to safely and effectively manage nuclear power. I'm very disappointed that and to the extent of the challenges that they're facing there.
Chris Gadomski is lead analyst, nuclear, for Bloomberg New Energy Finance, in addition to being a professor of nuclear energy for the 21st century. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com and The Daily. And right now, 105,000 tons of radioactive water at Fukushima Daiichi, not released. What is to be done? I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.